All right, everybody. PM2 OG from Instagram to YouTube. This is going to be a fairly feature-length video. I don't video edit, so I'm just going to kind of take one long shot here and talk about a few things that I've been wanting to do to kind of have a video to send people to when they have questions on my DM. Honestly, my DMs these days on Instagram are getting kind of crazy. I'm spending too much time there, so I kind of wanted to do a once and for all maintenance and fix video for YouTube so that I can just link that and people can go see this video. So first of all, just basic safety. You know, this should be obvious, but it's not all the time. Don't do this stuff if you can't do it. Don't do it if you don't have the right tools. Don't do it if you're going to hurt yourself or somebody else. You know, these are knives, they're sharp, they're dangerous, all that, but don't hurt your equipment. There's no need to damage things. There's really simple ways to do things. I'm not telling you to do any of this stuff. I'm just telling you what I do and how I handle different fixes. I've only sent a knife into Spyderco one time, and that was for a replacement because I had a S110V blade crack from right here all the way down, and so they replaced the knife for me, no problem. It was easy. But this is how I handle my knives, okay? So just be safe. Don't do stupid stuff. So I have several tools that I use for basic maintenance and any repairs that I do. I have the Fellholter screw-it driver. You probably won't find one of these anywhere. They're really hard to find. He doesn't make them anymore. This is the monkey Frag edge pattern. His pattern is like little diamonds here, like a diamond plate kind of pattern. I believe that's the one Mick Strider uses. He's always posting it in his videos or his pictures on Instagram, or at least used to. And then with this, they sent 4 of the basic sizes of the wire bits. Use wire bits. I don't understand why people chintz and get these Chinese junk. These are amazing. They're super hard. They go forever. Here's a T6 I've done hundreds and hundreds of pocket clip screws with. And look, there's a little bit of twist there, but not a lot, and it hasn't worn out. It hasn't stripped a screw yet. So little magnet in there holds it, but you don't need something this fancy. Just get the good bits. YM makes a full-size set of drivers where they're a full-length screwdriver with larger handles. Those are great. They're about 40 bucks on Amazon. For the heavy torque, I've got a multi-stubby from Klein Tools, very high-quality tools, and there's no magnet in there. It doesn't hold them, but it fits, and so that way I can just get torque to deal with breaking loose, Loctite and stuff like that. I've never run into a screw that I can't get with this except for one time, and it was an older production with red Loctite, and somebody had really gone to town with the red Loctite, and that's where I brought in this guy. Definitely don't recommend this, but it worked for me. I just simply heated up the screw up past the point, I think it's 300 and something degrees, where the Loctite will break loose but where it wouldn't melt the G10, and it came right loose, no problems at all. So here is your basic paramilitary 2 with some wild scales from Sharp Dress Knives. Love these things. They're thin, they're the perfect thickness, and he does just a great job execution style here. Really nice. And so this is how I take two more things. I use knife pivot lube. I don't use a lot. I use very little. I don't lube my knives all the time. I don't think it's necessary. I use a little, and when I do, it's knife pivot lube. It works. And then I use blue Loctite. This is Vibratite. It's the gel, so it doesn't come loose very easily. So taking the knife apart, I take the lock side off, and that is it. Unless you're doing a full scale swap, there is no need to take the full knife apart to do all the full maintenance. One of these days, Spyderco is going to go to a knife with all of the same size torque screws. That would be awesome. So I just take off the lock side. There's no need to do more than that. And you can leave the flat side. Now you see how that fell out of there? That is a titanium tube. If I'm going to do a scale swap, I'm going to put one of these on the knife. They just work. They're really good. And with these sharp dressed scales, they fit perfectly. Really nice fit and finish. So if I'm going to go to the trouble of taking one out, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put one of those back in. So let's talk about the first thing, and that is lanyard tube removal. I get this question constantly. So what I do is I take the two scales when the lanyard tube's still in there, and I twist them, and I get them loosened up, and I work them apart this direction, and one usually comes off. I say usually, every time one's come off. I've never not had one come off by just twisting and putting some pressure going this way carefully, and then you're left with one that does not have, that we have one that has not come off and has the lanyard tube. So what I do is I take a block of wood or a vise in my shop. I set it on the vise with a piece of leather, and then I take one of my wire bits because they're absolutely the perfect fit, and I slide that in there. And if you can see that, they're touching the lanyard tube, but they're not touching the scale. So you can tap it with a hammer. I have a little rubber hammer. I tap it. Yes, the same hammer that I beat knives through bricks with. And you tap this lightly, and that happens eventually. Okay? Now you've got, your scale is not damaged, and you've got your lanyard tube out, and then you can put a titanium tube back in. So that's how to remove a lanyard tube. The next thing that I deal with all the time on my DMs is blade centering. A lot of Spyderco paramilitary 2s and para 3s ship from the factory with blade centering problems. And it's actually not, 99% of the time, it's not the knife itself or the construction of the knife, just the assembly of the knife. So somebody who's making hourly wages is assembling these things, and they don't pay close attention to that stuff. And I'm talking and not thinking. Okay, here we go. So there's an easy, really easy method that I love. I learned it years ago. I don't know where I learned it. But I did not come up with it on my own. I started doing this, and it works so well. I've done it on a ton of knives. Basically what you do is you loosen the 3 screws on one side. So I've got these off. That makes it easy. And then there's an order of operations. So first you put the pivot screw in, and you snug it up where you want it. You get the tension just where you want it. You can test the blade. Now see, I've got it snugged up, but I still get a blade that falls. Okay. No blade play. That's going to be good. So I've got that in there nice and snug. Then I go for the pivot, or I'm sorry, the stop pin. And this is a place where guys go wrong a lot of times. They over tighten. If you over tighten, you can snug them up, but if you over tighten it, you can pinch the action right here and actually get a really sticky blade because of that. Now see, mine's still dropping. There's no knife pivot lube in there right now, but that's still dropping shut. And then we've got the frame screw. Now, if you put them together and tighten them in that order, so we've gone tension here, and then tension here, and then I usually give it a couple open and close, and then we should be centered. Now, this works most of the time. If it doesn't work, this is what I do. So let's say it looks like that. So it's favoring the lock side. I'm going to open it up. This is a little counterintuitive. So it's favoring the lock side. I open it up. And now what I want to do is I'm going to press on the pivot. And I'm going to bring the tip this way while I push the pivot that way. So I'm kind of flexing the blade towards me. Not hard, not a lot. And watch, I'm going to prove this point right here. When I shut it, because it was centered already, now it's going to favor the non-lock side. Okay, watch this. Look at that. Okay. It's a weird thing with these, but this works. It really does. And if I just let it go, it will probably stay that way. It's weird. I've never quite figured out the mechanics of why that is. So I want it to go back the other way, so I'm going to do the same thing this way. Let's see. Not quite. Oh, I just did the same thing opposite. I turn it over. Turn it over, go that way. There we go. Now we're going opposite. Let's see how much I moved it opposite. Now I moved it even farther the opposite way. So you can kind of just play with them and get them to go, and you can get them back. You can get them back to center where they'll stay. But I get them centered and they stay centered. They don't go back, they stay. It just takes a little bit of reassembly and playing with the blade, and they will get centered. It's just an assembly problem from the factory. A lot of guys complain about it and they just don't know that they can fix it themselves. Okay, so that's blade centering. Lock rock. This is very rare. Doesn't happen very often. Very rare. But that is where the lock bar is not going far enough into the slot on the blade for the lock bar. And you see that little ramp right there. The lock bar rides up that ramp, snugging the blade against the stop pin. So it pushes the blade down that way, pulling it into the stop pin, and you get a nice tight fit. Now, if the lock is loose, you'll get a little bit of lock rock because the lock is not going in far enough. So the way you fix that is you disassemble again. I'm going to take the lock side off again because you want the lock side. And then you take the lock out, and the one time this has ever happened to me, I just bent it a little bit, gave it a little more tension so that when it goes to lock, it has more tension that pushes on the blade that direction, which will pull that blade up tight into the stop pin. Okay, so there's your surface right there that contacts the blade, and it slides up that ramp as it goes. The farther it goes, the tighter it'll get. Now, the last thing is lock stick. I believe lock stick to be a myth in paramilitary 2s and para 3s. It doesn't really happen. It's not real. Sometimes they'll be sticky from the factory, but that's just minor break-in period. If you actually do run into one that's a real lock stick, you will send it back to the factory because there's a burr or something in place. So if you can see how that lock rides up, and as it rides up, it's going to move the blade like this, okay? So there's no reason for lock stick because you're not, like a liner lock or frame lock, they're like this. They're facing each other and abutting that direction. This is totally a different thing. Instead of pushing the lock like this, you're actually sliding the lock off the blade, not kind of pressing it against each other. So there's different forces at work here that create this lock mechanism, and so lock stick just really isn't a thing. It doesn't happen with these. There's a little bit of break-in sometimes, but that's it. So these are great tools. Take care of them, and be careful with them, and they will last a lifetime. Use the right tools. Be safe. I really hope this helps. Everybody have a great day. See you back on Instagram.